Oh, no, no, no. Marathon 2? Why Fair Games could be Sony's next marathon from Laura Fryer. Oh, God. Let's see what we're cooking up here.
You want to know about us? Seems like everyone does these days. It's simple.
Back in May of 2023, Sony stood on stage at the PlayStation Showcase and revealed two big new live service shooters at the same time, Marathon from Bungie and Fair Games from Haven Studios. Fast forward to April 2026, Marathon is actually shipped, but its player numbers are declining and retention looks pretty rough. Fair Games? It still hasn't launched, so we can't talk about post-launch retention. What we have instead are consistent reports from multiple playtests over the past few years describing the game as super clunky and simply not fun.
Jeez, what is the budget on this game, you know? That's what I wonder.
Problem insiders say has persisted throughout development. They're now desperately pivoting to a dedicated extraction mode called Concord. Cargo heist.
Oh, God.
Given that Sony brought in Bungie to review Naughty Dog's The Last of Us Online, a project that was reportedly around 80% complete, and Bungie's reality check helped get it canceled, it makes you wonder, why in the world would we believe that Fair Games is actually going to ship? Today I want to talk about extraction shooters.
I haven't even heard about this game at all. And of course, another pivot to an extraction shooter is such a why is this like the last ditch ever? Like, break in case of emergency, turn the game into an extraction shooter. You know, why is that the thing now? Like, it's so bad. We have all these like terrible extraction shooter games. Like, the genre has just become like the lowest rung of shooter games. I don't understand it. Oh man, did you see that one that we played recently that had died? The Cube? That one was crazy.
In 2026, and why it is that they keep running into the same wall. And a big part of it is they keep losing sight of the audience that has always made the genre work.
What if Escape from Tarkov wasn't the beginning of ushering in a new era of extraction shooters? What if it was just like a one-off, you know what I'm saying? What if it's just an outlier, you know? Obviously, Arc Raiders has come in and kind of changed that, you know, really taken over a lot of the spotlight, I would say. So we know that there's at least room for two big players in this specific genre. I'm not saying there can't be more, but it does seem very odd, right? That we kind of are looking at this and everyone's looking at it with the exact same intentions with Battle Royale, where they're like, oh, let's do what Epic Games did with Fortnite and let's jump into this genre. You know, they changed Fortnite to become a Battle Royale, right? Like, it already had existed, like the framework for it prior to that with the Save the World thing, right? And then they adopted it, you know, as like out of sheer, you know, luck, they kind of fell into it, like, oh, this happened to be like the best idea ever, right? So now people are using that same thought process to turn whatever shooter game they're developing, right? Because the genre of shooter games is just so ridiculously popular to a detriment at this point. We're so, like, when you look at how many good shooter games there are, it's like the fact that you would even try to compete against some of those games is crazy at this point, because genre is oversaturated, and now it's becoming oversaturated with extraction shooters. Yes.
Hardcore extraction shooters like Tarkov and Hunt Showdown have always been overwhelmingly played by adult men. A major Tarkov community survey showed 97.7% male, and Hunt is widely considered to be in the same ballpark.
It's a genre dominated by Chads, yes.
Most players are in their 20s to 40s. These players come looking for high-stakes tension, real risk and reward, and power fantasies that feel immersive and rewarding right from the start. When the characters don't look cool or desirable to that audience, or when the central fantasy theme feels off, you create an instant barrier in a game genre that's already hard to retain players in. Both titles hit this wall early. Marathon went for a bold, high-contrast cyberpunk style with saturated colors and plasticky surfaces, stylized androgynous characters. In fairness, some players really liked the fresh direction, but many others called it garish or simply unappealing. In a genre where the core audience wants designs that feel immersive or aspirational, that bad first impression really hurts the game. Fair Games face similar problems after.
You know, what's interesting about this too is that we talk about how, you know, Call of Duty and a lot of these games are a lot of the same slop every year, right? And the irony of it, not to be a defender of Marathon here, but the irony of it, not because Marathon's not the best case in this, but is that, trying these other things tends to fall short. Like there's basically just like two different art styles to these shooter games. There's the hyper realistic military style, and then there's the cartoonish style, like the full, Marvel Rivals, I meant to say. And like those are the only like Overwatch, those kind of like the two styles there are. I don't really see any others thriving, and it's you either stick to one or the other. And obviously Marathon was trying something new, something, you could say ambitious even, didn't land as well as they had hoped. And so now it's kind of just back to, what I'm saying? This is where I'm getting at, where it's like we're running out of creative ideas with some of these games at a certain point, right? Like if you can only make shooter games first person or third person, right? It's not like there's fourth person, fifth person, 19th person, like there's just first person and third person shooters. Like it's one or the other. So you just have two categories. And then you basically have two different art styles to select from. You have cartoon and then you have hyper realistic. And it's like you just keep going down the list of all the check boxes and you're like, holy shit, like even though it feels like you're just making up a world of anything you want, like it's pixels on a screen, you could make space magic all of a sudden, right? Like Destiny, Nova bombs and shit, right? It seems like there's maybe some limitations to this stuff to a certain degree. Or at least if you want to get creative, you have to get creative in other ways, I think that the art style, it's probably like locked in, like it's one of those two styles. I don't know if a third style is really going to emerge and win over people. At least it wouldn't seem that way, right? Like you're going to have to get creative in like the deeper mechanics and inner workings of the game. Like obviously like what Fortnite did with building, where like randomly you're in a shooter game, but then you can like put a wall up and a ramp and like, like build a building in an instant, like that style was probably the better route to go than to like start at like a fundamental level and try to like redefine the art from the beginning. I guess, at least that's what I see. You could easily come up with different concepts for art styles and see how people react to them. If you made a concept of a shooter game in terms of an art aesthetic and you post it on Twitter or something and it just like blew up, people were like, oh cool, like this could be a thing, We haven't really seen anything. Is 13th person a strategy game? It's not a thing, right? You get what I'm saying, right? There's certain limitations to this stuff.
For the reveal of their 2023 trailer, the exaggerated, trendy character designs were widely called out as distracting and simply not desirable to play as. A lot of people straight up laughed at it or mocked the trailer for that reason. On top of that, Haven Studios had built its internal culture around kindness as a core value, something Jade Raymond, the studio head, highlighted from the very beginning as a key to creativity and collaboration.
I haven't seen a lot of other game studios is kindness. We really believe that kindness is going to unlock the creative freedom or innovation. And that's something that really did come from the team. I wasn't there when the brainstorm happened and did this whole mind map thing, and kindness appeared.
On paper, that sounds great. Who doesn't want people who are kind? But we've seen at plenty of other studios how an extreme focus on kindness can easily slide into toxic positivity, where real problems and honest feedback get buried because nobody wants to be the one seen as being unkind.
That's a very good point, actually.
Given that emphasis, I thought they might lean toward a game that reflected more cooperative or positive team dynamics. Instead, the original marketing leaned hard into an eat-the-rich fantasy of robbing ultra-wealthy targets to rebalance the scales. Power fantasy works best when it's direct and escapist. I am powerful, I win, I take the loot. When it's wrapped into some moral superiority about robbing the rich, when what you're doing all the time in the game is just fighting other players for their stuff, it stops feeling like pure empowerment. It starts feeling like an agenda that doesn't quite align with what most players boot up a shooter for, which would be tight gameplay and satisfying power fantasies. That thematic mismatch created skepticism before anyone even played. What you show in your marketing and trailers is just as important as the actual gameplay.
It's an interesting dynamic that's brought up. And not that I don't think it goes this deep, you know what I'm saying, in terms of like activism or, morality when it comes to these games. But it is kind of odd that we play games that are like designed around like shooting other people and stuff, which is like, kind of intense, I mean, I obviously like shooter games. I've always liked them, it's just kind of, we just take it as just a part of the genre, and then we kind of wrap that into some of those other elements, not that it's like innately immoral to play a game where you shoot people, You know, like I don't think you're a bad person if you play GTA or really any shooter game, I guess. I mean, I guess I hope not. Like I've played so many of them. It's like it's escapism, it's, you know, it's an experience, right? And I feel like tying in some of those elements into it, it's maybe a bit like mismatched, you know what I'm saying? Like it just kind of doesn't vibe with the energy. Like the energy of a shooter game is kind of like, you know, I don't even know, like unhinged, like it's meant to be wild and crazy and exciting and thrilling. And that's kind of the energy behind it. I feel like we kind of in this later stage where for some reason we want to turn all these games into something else or have like some moral message behind it. And I genuinely think you're really going to struggle. Like if you actually get into the nitty gritty of it, this is why I don't go this deep, right? I don't go this deep because for me, gaming is just, I disassociate everything I'm doing in the game with real life. Like I'm not like thinking about this stuff in the real world, you know? So I don't go that deep into it. So then when you like associate real world values into the game and into the culture of your studio, you kind of like blur those lines in a weird way. And it's like, how do you make a game that's super moral and like has this like moral grandstanding and this like virtue signaling shit that people are so obsessed with? And then, but at the same time, you're going around like shooting people, you know? It's like those two don't really go hand in hand. You know what I'm saying? Like those aren't especially like, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't really work that way. Like it, when you get down, when you finally get to the last bit there where you're like, oh, this, we should probably shouldn't have went this route. You know, we should have just kept it as like, it's a video game. It's crazy. Haha. You know, it's not like the real world or anything. We should create a clear disassociation between those two worlds. I think that gaming should be entirely escapism and should be entirely another world where you can do a bunch of crazy shit. Like I've played a ton of GTA and I ain't trying to do any of that stuff in real life. You know what I'm saying? You can do some fucked up shit in GTA. You know, I'm not doing any of that, you know, and in the real world, I'm paying my taxes, tax paying, honest citizen, you know, not committing any crimes, right? I find this style really weird. I just don't think that they think it through very well. You know, they just don't, it doesn't really add up when push comes to shove. When you get to the final point of this, you're like, yeah, we're making a game where we shoot people and we're trying to like moral grandstand. It's just weird. It doesn't work, I think.
When it comes to attracting players, because in the beginning, that's all they have. Marathon released in March. It has strong gunplay and an interesting world, but the numbers are concerning. Steam concurrent players peaked at a good number, but have dropped sharply since launch with ongoing downward trends. At a reported budget well over $200 million, being mid for the core audience simply isn't enough.
That's true. And up to that other point where like nowadays what we're seeing with a lot of these games is they're kind of transitioning away from the like shooting other people thing. So then they're like, oh, well, we're not shooting other people. We're shooting other, like, this is like 3D printed versions of people with like their consciousness put into them, you know? And then like they don't bleed real blood. So it doesn't like look like you're literally shooting a person and like watching their fucking arm fly off, you know? Like that would be crazy gory, right? And like kind of insane, right? If you were, that's how the game functioned. And so instead they like bleed blue blood and stuff. And so like we're trying to like disassociate the gaming. We're trying to like water it down from it being as like the least violent version of it as possible, with it still being a shooter game. But the problem is the core element is still there. You're still shooting guns at things, you know what I'm saying? Like even if the things are inanimate objects, you know, it's still, you know, shooting a gun, you know, like that element is still there. You know what I'm saying? That element is still there. So you can try to water it down as much as possible and make it as least violent as possible. But ultimately, guns are pretty fucking violent, right? Like we could all agree with that. Like it's pretty, you know, if you've ever shot a gun or ever seen a real gun being shot, it's, you know, it's like it's intense moment, you know. It's like it's not something that's just casually done, unless you're a redneck from back where I was from in Oregon, dude. They'll just pop off their guns, driving down the fucking road. The rednecks, dude.
If this were a small indie studio, it might be fine. But when you're Bungie and you have that kind of money on the line, the game needs to be more than just okay to justify the investment. Fair Games hasn't released yet, so we can't talk about post-launch retention.
And the part that's interesting about the budgeting, I think this actually is a bigger issue with Destiny 2. And so our creators cost $75 million to make, right? $75 million budget. Obviously, it had an incredible ROI. Marathon was $250 million. And when I look at the two games, like I can understand why Marathon would cost more than our creators, especially considering they needed a delay because of the art theft scandal, right? So that obviously tacked on who knows how many more. Like that probably tacked on at least another 50 million more, probably maybe 30 million more. That delay alone, right? And then you have that. But when you look at the whole quality of it, like holy shit, like it costs like more than 3 times the budget of Arc Raiders, you know, and that's crazy. And part of it comes from like Cryo Archive, this like crazy end game map, right? And when you look at the puzzles and the depth of Cryo Archive, you're like, holy crap. It is very impressive. Don't get me wrong. It obviously has a much more in-depth end game than even like Arc Raiders because of these like puzzles and mechanics and stuff, which is very cool. But it didn't move the needle as much. Like it doesn't excite people quite as much. Like we watched the launch of Cryo Archive not like increase the player base by any substantial amount. So the part that sucks is that like the reason why Marathon wasn't a $75 million game, like Arc Raiders is a $75 million game, is probably because of Cryo Archive and because of like some of that stuff and other budgeting problems that Bungie has, right? Clearly, they have some big budgeting problems and they burn through cash too fast. You know what I'm saying? They just burn through cash way too fast. And that same problem, 1,000,000%, I guarantee you, is a one-to-one problem with Destiny 2. It's the same reason why Marathon or why Microsoft didn't want to buy Bungie, right? It's the same reason. They said they had too high of a burn rate. Like they just spend so much money to make something even so simple that it's just they can't become profitable because they just spend so much on it, you know? Like I think that when you look at when you look at the numbers between 250 for Marathon and 75 for Arc Raiders, that is really alarming. You're like, wow, like it's not even close. Like it would be one thing if Marathon was 100 million and Arc Raiders was 75. I would understand that. I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. Like the math adds up, you know, like, and that's fine. But like the stark contrast in price shows that Bungie is they're just not optimized with their game development process. And I don't know what it is along the way. Like maybe it's the reason why the guns feel so good. Maybe it's their like the art style and the crazy skyboxes. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not here to solve their optimization problems, but clearly they are extremely unoptimized. And that is literally causing Destiny 2 and Marathon to hemorrhage and bleed so much money. Because when you're not optimized, what you need to have is you have to have your game be a smashing success. Or if your game's not a smashing success, like Destiny 2 is not a crazy success lifetime, you have to over monetize it. You have to like have all these crazy microtransactions. You have to have all these crazy, you know, fucking buy a dungeon key for some reason, you know what I'm saying? That's the only way you can then sustain it. And so it's like this double-edged sword where Bungie is just way too, whatever it is in their development, they're just not optimized at all. And it's literally killing the game. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I mean, here's the thing. What would happen if they passed it off to another studio, right? And another studio started making things half the cost? Would the quality go down drastically? You know, what would it feel like, you know, is another interesting question. And I don't know what it would feel like, but it's crazy that it's that, like the stark contrast between the cost of Arc Raiders and Marathon shows you exactly the biggest problem with Destiny 2. They're just spending so much money to make even the simplest things.
What we have instead are consistent reports from multiple playtests describing the game as simply not fun. The original competitive heist sandbox is now pivoting towards a dedicated extraction-style cargo heist mode. Break in, drill the safe, grab cargo, and extract. Or use a getaway if things go wrong. Also, it's reportedly shifting to free-to-play. This follows rapid studio growth at Haven. They started around 50 to 60 people in 2021 and are now between 250 to 270 after Sony acquired them. Jade Raymond left in May of 2025 after a poor external playtest, and the original game director followed. When you combine fast scaling, leadership that hasn't shipped in a while, and creative choices that aren't clicking with their audience, it's an expensive and risky mix. And we're talking real money here. My best guess is that Sony's sunk probably $130 to $170 million into it when you factor in the acquisition and all the hiring.
That's literally a lot of this just comes down to them wanting to make money and making these games as a money proposition instead of making these games as like they have a good idea, you know? Like, hey, we have this good idea of this thing we want to make. And like, we think it's such a good idea that we're going to invest the money in it. Instead, they're just like, we have so much money. We have billions of dollars from all these PlayStation Plus subscriptions that we're just going to take a portion of this money and we're going to throw it at this game genre and something will stick. Surely we'll just throw $150 million and we'll just make an extraction shooter game and surely it will land, you know? And it's just not the case, you know? They have zero innovation, zero creativity. So there's nothing inspires people to play them, you know? No one's like seeing this stuff and thinking, wow, this is it. This is going to be the next shooter game.
And yes, I know one of the big benefits of being in Canada is because you get an extremely generous video game tax credit. They currently refund around 30 to 37% of eligible labor costs.
Oh,
That
damn.
means a huge chunk of those salaries get offset by the government. Even with that help, though, this is an enormous bet on a game that hasn't found the fun yet.
Damn.
At this point, I would predict that Fair Games is never going to ship. Or if they do ship, we're going to get another Concord. They've got
Rough.
repeated playtest issues, they've got leadership exits, and their desperate pivot suggests to me that the fundamentals still aren't there. Look, it's fine if game developers want to explore crazy looking or unattractive characters, if they want to create a distinct look like in Marathon. I will never be on the side of limiting the creativity of game developers. At the same time, these big studios need to scope the budget and the features for the audience they're actually targeting. In my opinion, the extraction shooter market isn't the best place for these expensive experiments.
Everyone's going to be leaving the extraction shooter genre, especially as Arc Raiders is even declining. You know it's bad when the game that was called Fortnite is now like down in the dumps. That's when you know it's bad. Where is it at right now? There's about to be a big Arc Raiders update, so let's keep that in mind that like the population is about to skyrocket. But man, did that go live recently? Back to 100,000. It was down to 80,000. That's pretty rough for how almost 500,000.
Not if you want to stay in the business long term. Extraction shooters aren't dead, but 2026 is showing how costly it gets when games drift away from the audience that has always supported the genre.
Yeah, they're not dead. Extraction shooters aren't dead, I would say, but it's just gonna have to be a really, really niche audience. So you're gonna have like a small studio of like 50 devs making the game, and you're gonna have to manage your budget accordingly with that, because you're just never gonna have like a massive audience for this style of game. At least that's the way it seems. It's just a little bit too brutal, too hardcore. And if people wanted to play that hardcore, they'd probably just be doing like some esports stuff. Like it serves a very weird middle ground there where I just don't think it quite appeals to the masses. And they tried. They invested all these hundreds of millions of dollars in these extraction shooters, and it just didn't really blow the genre up. For now, it's just Tarkov and Arc Raiders.
I think it's fun to see developers explore bold new styles and themes, and I'll never be against the creative freedom of game developers. Even when I don't
I will be against the creative freedom when they make Concord. I'm against it. I will stand against this.
personally love the aesthetic, the characters, or the message. That kind of experimentation is what makes games and the world more interesting. It should exist. The problem is when studios try to broaden appeal by simply layering on trendy ideas or aesthetics or messages on top of the core fantasy without deeply understanding why the hardcore audience shows up in the first place. You can't force people to love something new. You can only present it, test it early, and see what actually resonates. Ideally, before you've spent millions scaling a studio and building a full game. You grow a game by satisfying the core first, then thoughtfully expanding, not by bolting things on and hoping a wider crowd will suddenly love it. We've now seen enough of these experiments to recognize the pattern. I just hope the next extraction shooter learns from these lessons and delivers something that truly clicks with the players who've always shown up. Because when it does, that's when the magic really happens.
The part that's interesting about that is a good video from her as well, is that Marathon actually did something interesting where they made the game like more hardcore in a hardcore genre. So it's almost like it's not like they didn't listen in that sense. Maybe it's the art style that holds it back. Like I'm still trying to put my finger on exactly what Marathon's biggest problem as a game is. Like I find that to be a difficult thought experiment of like, what is the what is the nail in the coffin for Marathon? And the part that I go back to the most is probably just the art style. I just think it's very polarizing, and some people really, really vibe with it and like it, especially creative, artsy people really especially like it, it seems. Whereas, most people that are trying to play shooter games really like the militaristic style, because that's just like when you're making a shooter game, right? If you think about shooting a gun, like the realism is the most interesting element, I would say, for the most part. So there's like realism, and then the cartoonish style, it doesn't have the same realism, but it has like skill and like fantasy, right? So those are kind of just the two big areas. I wonder what the next big shooter game will be. Like, make your predictions in the comments. What will be like? I think Arc Raiders, I would say, is the last big shooter game that was a success. What will be the next one? Whether it's an extraction shooter or not, what will be the next new shooter game, because I feel like we're going to go through an era here where I don't think you're going to see a new IP of a shooter game thrive like Arc Raiders did. I don't know if we'll see that. It's going to be, it was a lot of years after Fortnite, we waited a while, you know, to see anything even come close to that sort of aura, right? And I feel like we're in this later stage now. I don't know if we'll see it again. Destiny 3, but even if Destiny 3, that's not a new IP, right? Destiny 3 would be a continuation of a already established IP, which is Destiny 1 and Destiny 2. I'm saying like Arc Raiders was a whole new launch of something that had never been seen before, you know, like it wasn't a continuation of anything. So the Division 3 is also a sequel, you know, and it might do well. And if it does, that's awesome. We'll see. I hope it does. But I wonder, I'm talking about like what would be a whole new IP? Like I think we'll be many years out before we see something like that again. It'll be many years out, if ever, because a lot of these shooter games, they've just kind of soaked up their audience and people are already well invested in them. And it's very hard to get people playing these new games anyway. So great video though. Let me know what you think down in the comments.